OpenAI considers a nuclear option of antitrust complaints against Microsoft. Canada builds its own ChatGPT to keep government data away from big tech. Canada's open banking system plans are stalled as government promises the earliest opportunity. And OpenAI warns its next AI models could pose bioweapons risks. Welcome to Hashtag Trending. I'm your host, Jim Love. Let's get into it. We joke about how fast things move in AI, but it wasn't that long ago that Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella was standing beside Sam Altman as he was reinstated as CEO of OpenAI. Microsoft had invested $13 billion in OpenAI, and it seemed like it was essential to Microsoft's future strategy. But there are rumors that the industry's most important partnership is cracking under pressure. OpenAI executives have discussed filing an antitrust complaint against Microsoft, what some are calling the nuclear option, marking the latest escalation in a relationship that's been deteriorating for months. Multiple sources are describing a potential federal complaint if negotiations over their partnership terms fail. The complaint would argue that Microsoft is using its dominant position in cloud services and contractual leverage to suppress competition and control OpenAI's future. The dispute centers on OpenAI's efforts to convert from a nonprofit to a for-profit company by year's end. Microsoft currently holds extensive rights over OpenAI's technology and profits, plus exclusive cloud hosting privileges that OpenAI desperately wants to modify. Tensions have been building for a while now since Microsoft hired Mustafa Suleyman, former DeepMind co-founder, to lead its AI division in March 2024, a move that reportedly angered OpenAI executives. The relationship further soured when Suleyman was reported as yelling at an OpenAI employee during a video call over delayed technology transfers. Last fall, Microsoft executives pressed OpenAI for technical details about their latest O1 model, which OpenAI refused to provide, and there was some suspicion that OpenAI was afraid that Microsoft was going to use that to develop their own AI. Meanwhile, Microsoft is reportedly demanding a larger ownership stake than OpenAI is willing to provide, while simultaneously developing its own competing AI models internally. The stakes are enormous for both companies. Internal estimates suggest that 40% of Microsoft's $22 billion in AI service revenue is linked to OpenAI technology. For OpenAI, losing Microsoft's subsidies could push annual costs beyond $9 billion, but the successful renegotiation could clear the path to a $100 billion IPO. OpenAI has begun reducing its dependence on Microsoft already, recently adding Google Cloud as a provider and participating in a $500 billion Stargate infrastructure project. The companies maintain a public front of cooperation, issuing a joint statement that talks are ongoing and we are optimistic we will continue to build together for years to come. But behind closed doors, what was once hailed as the model tech partnership is becoming a potential battle for control over AI's future. The Canadian federal government is racing to build AI tools that rival ChatGPT's capabilities, not to compete in the commercial market, but to stop its own employees from potentially leaking sensitive data to unauthorized applications. Ottawa's new AI strategy reveals a familiar challenge. Like employees everywhere, government workers are already using ChatGPT and other commercial tools for routine tasks like drafting memos, performance reviews, and potentially at the same time violating federal guidelines that ban putting sensitive information into public AI services. The government's solution is CanChat, an in-house generative AI system powered by open-source models hosted on federal cloud services. About 5,300 staff are currently testing the platform for unclassified work, with plans for a broader rollout. But Ottawa faces the same problem confronting organizations worldwide. Employees won't switch from commercial AI tools unless the internal alternatives are just as good. Stephen Burt, Federal Chief Data Officer, said in a recent interview, To get public servants to switch from ChatGPT to CanChat, the in-house tool needs to be available as soon as possible, and it needs to be as good. The strategy goes beyond just replacing ChatGPT. Government departments are building specialized AI tools like AgPal, which helps farmers navigate financing programs and regulations, and an AI translator trained on decades of parliamentary debates to preserve Canadian bilingual expertise. There are some legitimate concerns about building these services on a foreign commercial model. This push for AI sovereignty reflects growing concerns about data security and technological dependence. The Translation Bureau found that widespread use of commercial translation services was degrading Ottawa's own linguistic datasets as modern usage patterns flowed to foreign companies instead of staying in-house. Canada plans to prioritize Canadian companies when purchasing cloud capacity and AI models, while building as much capability internally as possible. Burt noted that the federal government has a surprising amount of in-house capacity to develop AI tools. But there is, or there should be, a deeper drive on the sovereignty issue. There are a number of reasons why governments are increasingly looking to ensure that AI remains under their sovereign control. Security and privacy are obvious, but there are also deeper issues of control. Recently, when Microsoft pulled access to its Office 365 tools, the International Criminal Court in Denmark came to a screeching halt. Imagine what could happen if a foreign government decided to restrict or stop access to an AI model that was at the core of government services. And then there's the whole idea of influencing the model. China's DeepSeek model, for instance, has been trained to avoid mentions of Tiananmen Square for obvious reasons. U.S. foundation models also have their own biases and omissions. So while being able to host and retrain the models is a potential solution, there's also a potential question of whether it's possible to retrain all the bias out of a model and how to support and develop that model going forward. It's a strategy and a challenge that governments must address, and although with the abundance of open source models, no one should have to start from square one, the development and continued enhancement and growth of an AI model is a significant task. So as much as government must win the support of its staff, it must also be prepared to embrace taking on the support and future development of its own sovereign large language model. It's a path that many countries are now facing, a question of whether they can be truly sovereign if they're dependent on American tech dominance. Can you be a sovereign country without your own sovereign AI? Industry advocates are warning that momentum has stalled as Canada's long-promised open banking system remains stuck in legislative limbo, with the federal government offering vague assurances about moving forward at the earliest opportunity. Open banking, officially called consumer-driven banking in Canada, would allow Canadians to securely share their financial data with third-party apps and services. The technology could let people view all their accounts on one dashboard and even provide services like helping consumers build their credit scores. The alternative to this data sharing, which is being used out of necessity, is a process called screen scraping. It's notoriously insecure in a world where fintech security and integrity are essential for acceptance and usage. The sad part is that other nations have long ago implemented such systems. The UK government launched open banking in 2017, and the European Union has had similar frameworks for years. Canada passed initial legislation last year, but it still needs a second bill to actually implement the system. The delays are frustrating fintech companies that have been lobbying for 7 years. Alex Francis, Executive Director of Fintechs Canada, describes the process as a slog. I don't think the government at first understood really what consumer-driven banking was, he said. Surprisingly, Canada has retained some entrepreneurial leadership in the fintech area, but only because these companies are able to sell to countries other than Canada. If there were hopes that a new prime minister, who'd been a former central banker, would accelerate the process, these were muted when references to open banking were notably absent from the Liberal election platform. Meanwhile, Canadians continue to use screen scraping, sharing bank passwords and third party apps to access financial data in the most insecure way possible. This all or nothing approach creates privacy risks that proper open banking would eliminate. There is, however, one bright spot. A shout out to the National Bank, who may have pulled off what we call the Uber strategy. Not waiting for government regulation, it's launched its own open banking framework, allowing fintech companies to securely access customer data when permission is granted. Natasha Boudrias, who leads the National Bank's open banking strategy, said, "We're certainly hoping that the government is going to kickstart the effort sooner rather than later so we don't have to get stuck in a loop of consultation." The delays highlight Canada's broader struggle to keep pace with global technology innovation. What we've applied to open banking, we could easily look at in terms of digital identification and other critical components to a new digital economy in the 21st century. OpenAI executives are warning that their upcoming AI models could cross a troubling threshold and present a high bioweapons risk. The ChatGPT maker told Axios that it expects successors to its O3 reasoning model to reach dangerous capability levels, prompting stepped-up testing and fresh precautions. OpenAI isn't claiming its AI will create new bioweapons, but it warns of what it's calling novice uplift, enabling people without biology backgrounds to do potentially dangerous things. OpenAI's head of safety systems, Johannes Heideke, says, "We're expecting some of the successors of our O3 reasoning model to hit that level." OpenAI isn't alone in sounding alarms. When Anthropic released Claude 4 last month, it activated new precautions due to potential biological and nuclear threats. Multiple AI companies are warning it's time to prepare for models that match or exceed human capabilities across various tasks. The admission highlights a stark paradox in AI development. Companies acknowledge their technology poses serious risks while continuing to build increasingly powerful systems. OpenAI plans to convene government researchers and nonprofits next month to discuss opportunities and risks. The company is also expanding work with U.S. national labs, exploring how AI might help combat others who could misuse the technology. OpenAI policy chief Chris Lehane said, "We're going to explore additional work in terms of how we potentially use the technology itself to combat others who may misuse it." And with the growth in open source models that have the same capacity and arguably perhaps better than some U.S. commercial models, it's a little late to be thinking about how we're going to control this. Geoffrey Hinton, regarded as the godfather of AI, but who left Google to warn the world about the dangers of unrestricted AI, was quoted on a recent YouTube video as saying, "I warned them and they wouldn't listen. Under normal circumstances, I might dismiss this as a YouTube hype, but I'm not sure it's not accurate." I want to stress I am an incredible supporter of AI technology. I believe that it can and will do great things for human civilization. But even if we don't get to artificial superintelligence, it may be time to acknowledge that we have a force that has the potential to be the next atomic bomb in terms of its impact on humanity. But we also exist at a point in time where multilateralism, the ability of countries to come together and achieve controls and regulation, is beyond improbable and perhaps impossible. And that's our show. I'd love to hear what you think. Write me at editorial@technewsday.ca. A couple of show notes. If you haven't checked out the new website, please do it. I'm desperately trying to get some corporate sponsors so we can increase the level of content we carry. Our mission is to make it easier to keep up to date with reliable and compact information. But we desperately need sponsors. We can't keep up without adding at least some additional resources in writing and researching. If you can help us out in the short run at buymeacoffee.com/techpodcast, it helps. That's buymeacoffee.com/techpodcast. Contribute the cost of a cup of coffee and maybe a donut once a month. It really does make a difference. And if you know any corporate sponsors who will help finance us through the next stage of our growth, any help at all is greatly appreciated. Finally, and I'll stop asking you for money, I want to get a couple of things going this summer. The first is a reading list, and we'll be doing a summertime show of our favorite books. The second is that I want to do some recordings of Project Synapse with a live audience. And if you're interested in attending, we record on Friday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Let me know if you're interested in either one of these things at editorial@technewsday.ca or under the video on YouTube. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a thrilling Thursday.